About to continue our conversation with Frank DeMeo. Glad to have him back and to share some more about all the things that he has been involved in, including making some promises to his lady love, the woman that he married, and definitely that is something that he wanted to do as she was definitely fighting that battle that we know many folks are fighting with breast cancer and all in that kind of space. So definitely he made a promise to her that he would do certain things, and definitely he has gone ahead and done some of those. But we'll talk about that as well as some of the other things that are going on in Frank's life, because Frank is always an amazing individual, being born and raised up there in Rhode Island and actually growing up in the restaurant business, which he says engendered a strong work ethic and a love of food. And I definitely know, but that love of food, gonna have to go out and get me a bite to eat later on today as well. Or maybe I'll have the food come to me, since we know that DoorDash is a wonderful thing and all in that kind of way. So definitely he even had a chance to be on a cooking show when he lived in Virginia, just up the road from me, and all in that space. So we're going to learn about some of these things that he's been doing and how he was even a chiropractic physician. I actually had a accident many years ago and had to go to one of our chiropractors in order to get that back straightened and make sure that everything was aligned as it is supposed to be aligned. And that was one of the accidents that I have had in life. Also broke some arms. Don't remember going to see a chiropractor after that particular incident, but maybe I did. I'm just not remembering it. But we're going to see what Frank is up to, and even might learn about some of his hobbies as well. So I'm going to bring Frank in and we'll dive into some of these topics and see what's going on in Frank's life. So how are you doing, Frank? Glad that you're here
I'm
with
doing
us and
very
all
well,
in
Mark.
that space, and definitely glad to be back and have this conversation. I know you said it was a little bit on the chilly side in the building, even though it's feeling quite spring-like here in Durham, North Carolina. It's probably been like around 70 degrees, even though we did have some rain earlier today, and definitely spring may be coming earlier, or maybe old man winter will have one last kick at us before getting on out of here. And of course, we do know that this is March, which means that tournaments are coming up, the conference championships in basketball, and definitely my alma mater, Marquette, just
Yes.
won the Big East regular season title. Now we'll see if they can win the conference title in terms of the conference championship and that kind of way, and then we'll see what they can do on the national side. But it's the first time that they had won a championship of that sort since, I think they said, 76 or something like that. It's been a long time of coming. So definitely that was when they were an independent. So it's been a long time of coming of being ranked as high as six. That's what it was. They've not been ranked as high as six. I think they did have one other conference championship back in the day in Conference USA and a couple of other conferences that they have belonged to. But this one they have solely, it is all theirs, and they got up to number six, which is the highest they have ever been since before I went to school there, and all in that space. So, Frank, how are you doing today, and how is life treating you? And tell me about the
Oh,
weather up there.
very well. Doing very well. Speaking of basketball and March Madness, and you going back in history,
Mhm.
the my alma mater in 1974 made the Final Four,
Oh
and we
well,
were extremely proud of that. And that was Providence College. So,
yeah.
great team.
That is actually
Auburn.
one of the Big East. That's actually one of the Big East schools that we play regularly, and they are doing quite well and are expected to make the big dance also this year. So Providence is doing well. I think they were either second or third. They were one of the teams that were chasing us, but like I said, we did manage to get the victory that we needed. So we don't need the victory on tomorrow when we play St. John's, but it's always good to have a little bit.
Uh, Always the wild card.
Yeah,
St. John's,
always,
always the wild card. Never know.
always.
Uh,
And we can't tell which way they're going, and all in that space, no doubt about it. But like I said, the weather is doing well here and everything. I was fascinated. I want to get to the whole thing around the promises that we talked about last time, but I did not realize the last time that we talked that you had had some success as a cook and grew up in the restaurant business. So I do know that that is a very difficult business, because they say that the majority of restaurants that are started actually fail and don't succeed and all of that. But you also have to, as your bio puts it, a strong work ethic. So, and I'm sure you got that love of food, and maybe there is certain foods that you love more than others. But I was just wondering if you could share with our audience a little bit about that work ethic and just about the restaurant business in general, and how long you were in it, and even if you are still doing cooking as a side hobby, even to this day.
Well, growing up, I started at the age of 11, um, standing on a milk crate. Remember the old wooden ones with the
Mhm.
metal the ribs in it?
Yeah,
I
definitely.
had to stand on that in order to reach the silverware at the bottom of the sink.
Mm.
And so I was 11 years old. And over time, as I got taller and older, you start waiting on customers.
Right.
And that is the sheer shock of it at 12 and 13 years old is pretty heavy. I mean, because people come in and they go, "Hey, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that," and you go, uh, uh, my parents are behind you, and they say, "Oh yeah, well that's over there, and that's over there," and over time you get into it. It becomes an excellent classroom for socialization and
Mhm.
communication.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I did not know, and like I said, I was looking over some of your other bio that not that long ago when your wife was living, that you actually were living just up the road from me in Virginia, and you earned a spot on a local cooking show and actually won with some deer shoulders. So definitely got to hear about this. How did those deer shoulders manage to get cooked? And did you actually go out and catch the deer? Because we do know that.
No, no, I didn't. Somebody else did. So, but at the time I was working for a delicatessen,
Mhm.
and he wanted to have dinner specials. So I went in and created a three menu dinner, 9.99 specials, and it took off.
Well,
And he was very happy about that.
sounds like.
But a friend of his had a uh, cooking show.
Mhm.
So he happened to come in, and I had made farfalle and the vegetables in a light Alfredo. And he loved it.
Well.
So he said, "Hey, why don't you come on the show and do some cooking?" I said, "But I'm not going to make pasta. I mean, that's you know, I'll do something. I'll tell you what, I'll cook a meat. Don't know which one it'll be yet, but I'll cook a meat." And a friend of ours had a deer shoulder in his freezer.
Mm.
So he said, "Hey, why don't you use this?" I said, "You're talking about a shoulder. That's like doing sirloin. You chewing rubber." And he said, "Yeah, well, don't worry about it. I'll fix it." So he trimmed it out. I marinated it for 3 days.
Wow.
And in blackberries, raspberries, uh, like 2 tablespoons of lemon juice and orange juice,
Wow.
garlic, and crushed red pepper seeds.
Mm. Sounds very delicious and everything. I know that you have moved away from that kind of cooking because I know in reading about you and everything that you've moved now toward more of a vegetarian lifestyle and definitely.
Yeah, I love kale. I think kale is a magic green. I eat them all, broccoli, kale. I can't do asparagus though because it
Mm.
kicks up. For some reason, it kicks up my rheumatoid
Wow.
in my fingers. They get fat. But that's not bad. It's okay. But yeah, kale and beans, kale and broccoli, kale and olive oil, kale and apples.
Mm.
Do Granny Smith apples with
Well,
kales, stir fried in a pan. It'll knock your socks off.
I have to try that. I was saying you also enjoy, still, even though you might be leaning toward vegetarianism, you're not opposed to a prime rib. And I do know we have some good prime ribs
Yeah,
around here as well.
there's a local bar restaurant that is not far, about 5 miles away from me. And Saturday evenings is prime rib night. And I'm an end cut person. I'm not a middle cut. I'll go there once a month, maybe once over a 6 week, maybe even an 8 week period. Get my end cut, sit there at the bar, have a beer, and have my prime rib, and be in heaven.
Sounds like it. One thing I was curious about is you had a very illustrious career there as in your uh, towns and in the different towns that you've lived in, because you lived in a couple of places as a chiropractor, and I definitely mentioned that earlier. I know that Mr. Brown, who is a chiropractor here, would be glad to know that I'm talking to a chiropractor here on Pod TV and everything. But it looks like you gave that up and went more to the arts career. So what led you first into chiropractic, and what got you out of chiropractic? I guess is the two questions that I'm really asking.
That's an excellent question because it's very historical in nature. I was 19 years old, working 3 jobs, 2 on the side from working with my parents in the diner, and I fell asleep going home and hit a tree right around the corner from my parents' home. Spent over 3 months in the hospital, multiple surgeries, and recovered. I was blessed. I can't put it any other way. I should have been in the ground. But from that experience, I wanted to go into medicine. So over time, I took a lot of science courses and was getting tutored in French and was planning on going overseas to go to school. During that time, I was working as a respiratory tech in a hospital in Boston. And when you're in that kind of situation in the hospital and you're a patient, your dignity is somewhat put on the fence because of the demands medicine places on you as a patient to expose yourself. Now, I'm 19 years old. A lot of things happened to me, granted, that required intervention on a very aggressive manner. But my dignity had been taken away in a sense. So when I started to work as a respiratory tech, one particular patient that I played cards with because I worked at night, go in, give her a treatment, and play gin. I had a very serious lung situation. And rounds, they were doing evening rounds, and 6, 8 students, doctors, came into the room. And the head of the department was standing next to the bed, explaining the patient's condition and what he was planning on examining, which is fine. That's proper and customary to do that, especially to inform the patient of your procedure. Well, he took the sheet and literally just flung it down on the bed, exposing the patient completely to everyone. It took me back to being in the hospital. My immediate response was to take the sheet and cover the patient again. And he looked at me. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "If you're going to examine the patient, expose the area you're going to examine, but don't expose the whole body. You're embarrassing her in front of your colleagues." Well, he took affront to that, and he proceeded to do the same thing again. And I reached back down and put the sheet back up on the patient. So he excused me from the room, and I ended up getting fired for that.
Mhm.
But I never forgot it.
Mhm.
And it was an earmark point of dignity for me when I became a physician, chiropractic physician, in terms of bedside manner
Mhm.
and care for the patient. So that's how I became a chiropractor. Mainly, I was living in Boston because I was working at a hospital there. And the guys across the hall were students of Boston Conservatory and New England Conservatory of Music.
Mhm.
So they were teaching me how to play the alto saxophone.
Okay.
One of them wanted a ride to go to the doctor, and I'm saying, hey, sure, I'll take you. It turned out to be a chiropractic physician.
Mhm.
And he gave me some books. I read them, and I realized that there was no reason for me to be going to France. Everything that I wanted to do in terms of healthcare was right there in the profession of chiropractic.
Mhm.
And that's how I became a chiropractor.
Sounds amazing. Truly amazing story. You just brought up something that I was wondering about sometimes because I know my mom, probably a few years back, had some surgery and folks were giving her some medicine or not even medicine. I think it was some food or something like that. And she felt that they had not actually followed the instructions of looking at what they were doing. So they had not done enough hospital care because I think they were about to give her
Right.
something that she probably would have not reacted well to. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember whether it was a medicine or a food, but she took that as a uh, teaching moment versus a scolding moment. So I just wondering, do you think that that is something that more hospitals need to do is be aware of that patient care and all of that? Because like I said, mom was a patient, never had, she's had relatives, including a sister, one of my aunts that was a medical librarian, but she did not
Mm-hmm.
scold the person. She just took it as a educational moment to tell them what they had done wrong and to do it in a diplomatic way. But I was just wondering, as a former chiropractic physician, do you think that the bedside manner is there as much as it should be?
I believe it is. It's part of our education, it's part of our training, and it puts us separates us, puts us
Mhm.
apart from other professions
Right.
in terms of being able to sit there and listen, not intervene, not dictate, not say, do as I say, not as I do,
Mhm.
kind of an attitude. And it stood me, it helped me in terms of my practice. I had an excellent practice. Patients were amazing kids, infants, right on up to grannies and grandpas.
Mhm.
Didn't matter.
Yeah. Sounds like it. You're also an artist, and I know that my dad is actually being recognized by the Durham Arts Guild as an artist as well, and he also has a love of science and a love of some of that even showing up in his artwork and all in that kind of space. But definitely a love of psychology, a love of some of the biologies of biological sciences as well as some other sciences, and definitely a love of the arts. But I was just wondering, how much do you feel is there a correlation between your art love, because you are actually in collections in the US and Canada and have gotten awards for your photography? And by the way, dad is also a photographer as well. But how is the correlation between the arts and the science background? Because we oftentimes will hear people talking about a left brain and a right brain, but it sounds to me like you have the both of the best of both worlds. Because I was thinking that the doctor and the chiropractic stuff would probably be more on the right brain, if I remember my analytics correctly,
I,
and the left.
I don't know. I think I'm not good at math. So that's left brain, very linear. But
Right.
I mean, I do have moments of linearity in terms of things that require attention, but I tend to bounce.
Hmm.
I'm not, there are some people who can sit and be very specific in their time spent. I get bored. It's- If it's not stimulating me, I'm going to go and find something else that will. So from that standpoint, that's where the art came in.
Mm.
And that, actually, it started when I was in the fourth grade. I made a wreath for Christmas.
Mm.
And my teacher at that time, and I still remember her name, Miss Kelly, she was a peach. She
Mm.
was reinforcing and directing at the same time. And I never forgotten her in terms of all of the gifts of creativity that she offered us in guidance. So, but then, life gets on and I put it aside.
Right.
But it came back um, when I left chiropractic. And what had happened was I was powerlifting with some friends, and I herniated 2 discs in my lower back.
Well,
One disc had 2 herniations on it when we did the MRI, and then the other one was in a different direction. So that pretty much squashed my chiropractic.
yeah, your chiropractic career and everything.
Yeah, because I was a hands-on physician. I mean, there are techniques in chiropractic that are very subtle.
Yeah.
Um, I used some of them, but I was not a strong proponent of them. I moved those bones. That was my thing. Make that adjustment. Put the energy into the spine, and the nervous system will follow
Yeah,
and make whatever changes are necessary for that person.
that makes sense.
So,
We have a show. We have a show here on the network. Billy Graham does it. Not Billy Graham, the evangelist, but our own version of Billy Graham. And he was in the military, and he has traveled to Bali. He went to um, the Korea we like, South Korea, and then he went to travel in other parts of the globe, including some trips, but not living to Africa. And I would describe him as somewhat of a restless soul as well, a nomad, because definitely he is back home in his home state of Texas. But I would not be surprised if next week or a week later he doesn't wind up moving as well. So I was just wondering how much of that was in your life, because it sounds to me like part of the promise that you made to your wife and everything. Because it does sound like you've been as you like to put it in your bio, a restless soul and sand in the shoes. So, how many places have you been to, and how much of that is in your DNA?
well, dad's Italian, my mother is Greek. The Mediterranean input is very strong, and they liked to travel. We would take vacations, in the 50s and 60s. A big vacation was going to the Catskills in New
Mhm.
York, or going up to Lake George or something like that. So it wasn't every year, but there were times that we would take off. But it wasn't until I did a study program from high school that took me to England to study at the University of Southampton, which was a lot of fun. There were 65 of us in the program, and we were from all parts of the country. But that experience, traveling to England, going to the University of Southampton, spending time in London, spending time in Paris, that was it. That's when the sand was fixed. It wasn't any way of taking that shoe off and dumping the sand out. I was ready to move. I've been to Scotland, been to Canada, been to Mexico, spent 2 winters in Mexico, uh, back to back, about 6 months each trip, and been pretty much all over our the states. Uh,
Yeah.
Lived in Colorado, lived in New Mexico, spent time in Arizona,
Mm.
lived in Florida, lived in Virginia, lived in Canada.
Wow. Yeah, sounds like you've definitely been around and everything. I know that you've got some. We'll get back because we talked the last time you were here on about a promise made and a promise kept. Definitely want to get to some more around that. But you've also got some books that are in the Q as well, and I'd love to hear about these before we get to that, because you've got the psychology of healing, which we've kind of alluded to, which is based on your years of practice. And sometimes I think people don't even know how to be healed, because sometimes it can be a mindset. And we've been talking about, at least the news has, around this opium war, and you have a story that actually points out that it is not a new war. That there was actually opium wars way back in 1852 and 1862. So we're talking about 160 years ago and everything, and definitely the book around the patriarch. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about some of these books before we get to the love story between you and your wife and everything. But I do sometimes feel that we don't do enough and know enough about the healing process.
Yes, the psychology of healing was an interesting thing because I was in Canada and using my knowledge in chiropractic, process and neurology, and using a technique called Bowen, which is soft tissue, very gentle movements of the skin.
Mhm.
But what I noticed was how clients or patients responded when you asked them, "How are you feeling today?" And that was like opening up a Pandora's box. They would say all kinds of things. Oh, my hangnail's killing me. My had a headache. I've had this. My stomach is upset. So everything is basically negative in its connotation. What I realized from that is it was impacting how they were responding to care.
Right.
So by asking, what good things have happened today? Have you seen anything that was beautiful today?
Mhm.
Immediately, it places a positive intention, a positive thought
Right.
in the client and patient's mind, and they respond to that in kind. And lo and behold, their symptomatology, the signs and symptoms, or their pain levels, or the whatever was bothering them, began to improve.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that sometimes people can worry themselves to death or worry themselves sick. And I do have some friends that are that way. And you also have people that seem to be always happy. And even in hard times, they find a way to put smiles on their face. I'm not going to say that I don't get depression, or things that are kind of on the sad side, but I do try to have that latter lifestyle where you are able to find the positive even in a negative. So I was just wondering, how important do you think it is to go outside and breathe the fresh air, see things that are, for some people might consider trivial, like the clouds in the sky and the rabbits playing in the field, or just the kids and the house pets doing whatever they may be doing when they are out from their home fronts and all in that kind of space. But how important do you think it is to enjoy the little things and to have the joy of childhood even as a adult, whether you're 20, 30, or even 70 or 80, or even some of us that are more in those middle ranges? But how important do you think it is to have a positive outlook on life?
I think it's extremely important. You have to remember that whatever you do that impacts your emotion changes your chemistry. Neurologically, there are hormones that get secreted, not just in the nervous system, but are stimulated and secreted in other organs and systems of the body.
Right.
So, doing that changes it. And being that it's a positive change, it can overcome the negative impact or the depressed system
Yeah.
from thinking poorly, worrying. So
Yeah.
all of those elements are very important.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to give you the screen to share that story around your wife and everything for a second. But before we get to that, and I'll also give you the screen for that as well, because I'm multitasking as I oftentimes do and everything. How important do you think it is to be um, able to have empathy with those that are going through a lot of things. Because I noticed that one of the things that you were involved in is working with autistic children, and I know that that actually has a special place in my heart because a friend of mine actually has a store that hires autistic kids and raises money for folks in that autism battle. Because I think that particular friend had some family members or others that were in that space, so they have been doing work with their thrift store around autism, and we actually did a fundraiser about a year and a half ago in that space with a local singer that sang and actually raised some funds, not as much as we would have liked, but still some funds to fight that autism battle. But whether you're talking to somebody, we actually have a lady here on the network that has cerebral palsy. So whether you're talking to somebody with cerebral palsy or things that are outside of the natural disease like cerebral palsy and what I just mentioned, autism, but also those that have been impacted by violence and other things. Because there's another lady that is actually a traumatic brain injury survivor, and hers was from a violent act, and all in that space. So, just wondering, how important do you think it is to have empathy, whoever you are?
You should be thoughtful and considerate in any situation. It has nothing to do with what is impacting an individual. It has everything to do with just the individual. You're treating them human. They're a human. You're a human. We all have difficulties. We all have situations that we wish we didn't get involved in or thought of. But when it comes to inequities of mind and body, empathy in that situation or any other is extremely important. And sometimes there are people that they may think they're being empathetic because they're reaching out, but sometimes what they say detracts from that.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
There are 7 words when my wife was ill, and I specifically put in the book because I despise them. It hurt me to hear them. Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Mm.
Let me know if I can do anything. Well, like I wrote, well, can you take this disease off my wife's hands?
Right.
It's not that they weren't being empathetic, it's that their choice of words through upbringing or exposure or experience were just the wrong ones to choose.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely the wrong ones to choose. That can be a very heartbreaking thing and everything. You just mentioned it. Are there words that frustrate you other than ones that you just mentioned when you hear them? Because I do know that there are sometimes, my dad actually did a piece around that. Speaking of art and everything, he did a piece called, it's basically like a installation piece, but it was called Thoughts and Prayers. And it's basically, it was a, like the thing that you pull down when you want to let folks know about the fire alarm and all in that space. But he had grabbed that and he put the words thoughts and prayers because he, as his theory is, and what the artwork was confessing, was that a lot of times we give platitudes, but we don't really have action behind them. So, like I said, we'll tell people that we want to give them thoughts and prayers when really all they need is a good meal or a house or some sort of housing. And the thoughts and prayers, while they are good and can help reach the higher power, it sometimes people need an actual action behind it and just not empty platitudes. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with prayer because prayer is very powerful, but at the same time, there are times that you need to have actions behind your words.
I agree with that. I'd like to see your dad's installation.
Mhm.
Um, is it in North Carolina?
It's in North Carolina, but he's traveled it up and down in other places. You can actually go to bambooturtle.com or bambooturtle.org. I can never remember whether it's .com or .org, but he has a love of both bamboo and turtles. He's actually had several turtles in his life, and you can see his artwork on the web. And there's some friends of mine that are trying to see if they can get those lovely NFTs and other things to also show the work. But right now it is definitely on the website and is definitely available that way. So definitely is some amazing artwork. He's even done some abstract artwork around animals like insects and other things as well. So and even what some people would call not so much lost objects, but like found objects, like the spokes on a railroad track and nails and things of that nature. So he's done some interesting artwork around that space also.
Now that would be interesting. Insects, I don't see the art in insects. So, but yeah, it's funny because when Judith and I were living in New Mexico and I was attending the University of New Mexico, doing studio courses there, students were doing things with insects and bees.
I'll be right there. I gotta grab my bag.
I don't get it. It didn't, it didn't stir any interest in me. It didn't make me want to think of something else. Most artists like to do something and they say, okay, now I'll just leave it for the individual to do whatever interpretation of the piece that they choose. And I thoroughly agree with that. But that's like saying, okay, I'm going to take this piece of aluminum foil, I'm going to put a push pin through it and stick it on the wall and call it reflection.
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't work. Not for me anyhow. But
yeah, different folks have different tastes and different things that strike their fantasy. So I can definitely, and like you said, it's not for everybody and all in it that kind of way. Should remind our listeners again about the story between you and your wife and the promise that was kept. Because like I said, she did have this long battle with, I believe it was breast cancer and everything. And you just reminded our audience that didn't catch the first interview about that and some of the lessons that you learned that you try to pass on to particularly other men that are grieving, whether that is a older man or a younger man.
Well, our journey in that process started in 2000 with her diagnosis, and using journaling took me a while, but journaling became my escape months later.
Gotcha.
For Judith, it was immediate. She could sit there and pour out her heart. Me, no. Now, you would think the artist side of me would fall into that very quickly, and that wasn't the case at all. Tap the pen on the desk, twirl it around on my fingers, doodle, draw stick figures. I couldn't bring myself to put words on the paper.
Wow.
But when I was able to do it, it was like, somebody opened up the floodgates, and it was my emotional release. What I realized was that I had to become a scribe.
Gotcha.
Egyptian type of concept, where people were there taking notes, writing a story about daily events. And that's really what helped me.
Right. Well,
But it's triggers, it's things that happen. You have a sense of calm, and then something happens.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the lessons that you wish people would learn in that grieving process? Unfortunately, I have both of my parents with me, but I definitely lost some friends and lost some dear friends as well as some aunts and uncles, but definitely some, and even a cousin that was lost as well, and actually in a young age, actually in childbirth, if I remember correctly. But what are some of the lessons that you would give for those that are in the grieving process?
Um, I would say think of your journaling as an opportunity to allow yourself to have grief.
Right.
You definitely need to have the emotion of it, but you also need to step back from it a little bit. You
Right.
need to transition or not allow it to consume you.
Right.
Um, if you if you can do that, it doesn't define you. See, the problem is once you've stepped off the edge and you
Mhm.
jumped into the rabbit hole of survivor's grief, grief becomes you, and
Mm.
you become grief. So you have a tendency to lose yourself.
Gotcha.
And if you can get away from that by lowering your expectations about grief, because our expectations are based on other people, not based on ourselves.
Right.
So if we can lower that so that we actually have an opportunity for success
Mhm.
in our grief, it will minimize it to the point where you can see past it, which is important. You have to look forward of your grief. And that took me months. I mean, it's only a few sentences here, but we're talking about some serious emotional and mental work
Yeah.
to 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 put this into perspective. So the journaling was the allowance, the framing of it, the expectation and lowering it, and then to surrender. When you can surrender, that means that you're not you're not just being pigheaded,
Hmm.
because we're men.
Yeah.
We grew up for our generation. I
Right.
mean, I'm a little bit older than you probably, but we're patriarchal. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
kind of an environment that we grew up in.
Right.
Mothers were the matriarchs, Papa was the patriarch.
Mhm.
So being stoic, having answers, not showing emotion,
Yeah.
holding things tight to the chest. It's almost genetic
Yeah.
in its format.
Yeah.
But if you can find someone, a friend, a family member, just one person, not a whole bunch of people, just one individual who will accept you for who you are and what you're going through and allow you to speak,
Yeah.
to share without interpretation, without defining what they expect from you. Just being a listener goes a long way.
No, that makes sense. How important, and we're going to wind down shortly and everything, how important are affirmations to you, and how important are they to your own journey of healing and all in that space? I'm going to give you the full screen on this one as well. And then I've got a very unusual question to ask about your wife and y'all's relationship, but I'll they'll bring that after the affirmation. I don't think it'll be that unusual, but it might be
Okay.
one that you might not be expecting.
Well, understand that meditation, prayer, and affirmations go in hand. They fall under the umbrella of mindfulness, so to speak. Your ability to find simplicity in your actions with purpose. Purpose is the important point, because if you don't have any purpose, you're functioning, you're chasing life. You're going after things that your neighbor is doing. It's like keeping up with the Joneses kind of an attitude. But affirmations are extremely important. They reinforce the positive aspects of your mental capacity. They allow you to feed your subconscious with positive words. And that's the key point here. It can change how you think and feel and live. Your ability to be, for lack of a better word, prosperous doesn't have to mean money. It can be every single thing that's important to you: community, church, family, home, job. Those are all important. Money. But you have to put them all in perspective. They have to have a semblance of balance in your life. We tend to live in chaos, and affirmations can actually pull you more towards the balance side because you begin to view things differently. Changes your mindset. It's not about post-it notes. It's not about finding affirmations on the internet. It's about dropping into yourself, being present to yourself. And if you can do that, you'll notice a change within weeks, how things move, how you are impacted by adverse situations as well. Your whole mindset begins to change. You're calmer, much calmer, and you laugh. I love to laugh.
Laughter is very important, and I don't think that we recognize enough about laughter and the importance of keeping that childhood in us as well. And that's one of the unusual questions I was going to ask you is, what do you think is something that would surprise your wife about the Frank of today versus the Frank that she knew before she passed away? So that was my unusual question. What do you think is something that if she was to come back down to this earth, and I know that in our past interviews, you said that you felt her presence with you, even though she's been gone now for a while. But if she was to come and be able to talk to you, what is something that she would say that, like, Frank, you never did that, or you never were that way? It's like a personality trait.
She was always proud of me in the fact that I had determination, perseverance, and faith. But I was in some situations or circumstances would be classified as a hothead because I was a volcano. And it isn't because something was wrong. It was my, for lack of a better term, become very prevalent in today's environment and conversation, obsessive compulsive. You just, you expect things to be in a certain way. And when I was younger, that was very much my mindset.
Yeah.
But with Judith, she whipped me into shape. Boy, I'll tell you, she took me by the ear and, like Nonna would do, your grandmother grabs a hold of you, or your mother grabs a hold of your ear and kind of shakes your head and say, no, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
that makes a lot.
Yeah, and I think that if she was here, she would give me a hug and whisper in my ear and say, I'm very proud of you, Francesco, and you've come a long way.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I may have asked you this before, but I don't remember your answer. Do you think it is possible to find love again? Because it seems like y'all had a very deep connection, but there are some people that say that there is only one soulmate and that you can't have another one. And definitely you have fulfilled promises to her that you had made, including the promise around travel and everything. But is it possible to have more than one love in your life, or are we destined to have in your philosophies only one soulmate, and that too, Judith, was to you?
I think if you had asked me that question when I was younger and before Judith and I met, I would probably answer it. There's only one. But Judith taught me some very important things when we were together, and that was allowance, allowing yourself the opportunity to see in someone something that they may not see in themselves.
Right.
And if you're open enough, it will come to you. So I'm open.
Yeah.
Hasn't
I mean,
yet.
Doesn't mean it won't. It just hasn't. It
But doesn't mean it won't. That's correct.
It might come at a later time and all in that kind of way. But as we're winding down and everything, what advice would you give? Because this is a global network. I've told you that before and everything for folks that are listening that can be a source of inspiration and hope, because that's almost like a personal mission of mine. And I definitely consider myself to be an empath, but I was just wondering what are some of the messages of hope and positivity that you can give to the audience? And if you want to share a little bit about the other books, I alluded to it earlier that you've got one coming out about the Opium War, and I know that a lot of people are concerned about what's going on in that space now in the 21st century. But you were talking about the one that was in the 1800s, if I remember correctly, and all in that kind of space. But definitely, if you can just share about how it is not a old issue and any message of positivity and hope that you can give. So I know it's two questions, but start maybe with the opium one and then the positivity. And the third and final one would be ways that folks can get in touch with you, because that's all about letting people be heard from as well.
Okay. So Opium Wars first. Is that what you said?
Yes, please.
Okay. There are two Portuguese sailors. They meet in Macau, working trader ships. In the process, they get jobs working for Chinese pirates, being traders to their comrades and giving the pirates information on the ships so that they can be rousted after leaving port of China.
Mm-hmm.
That period of time was very tumultuous. Now, one of the sailors, Giacomo, falls in love with a village woman, marries her, and then a few years later, she dies of dysentery. So there's some similarities there in terms of the storyline in my own life. But there's a purpose behind that. These two sailors go through, I don't know if I can say this, they go through hell. I don't know. If it gets cut, that's fine. They end up in prison, Chinese prison, for almost 2 years. They don't know anything about one another, whether they're alive, their friend is alive or dead. And then suddenly, the powers that be change in China, and the magistrates from England, since they never found any of the stolen goods from the ship that they were blamed for having robbed, they were finally released. And that's the premise behind the first book, The Prelude to a Friendship. The Pearls, which is the second one, is them attempting to meet in Portsmouth, England, to split the spoils that they had collected in China. And all things start going south in that story. It moves from Portsmouth, it goes to London, it goes from London back to Portsmouth, and then a lot of things are going on. And it's a 340-page book. So Patriarchs, which is the third one in the trilogy, it takes us from post-Civil War to World War I. Now, characters from the Pearls, generationally, are the characters for the patriarchs. Patriarchs are two families, two fathers, two men, seek their fortune coming to the United States. One is poor, the other one is silver spoon in his mouth. But they make good, they make do as they go here. One son marries the daughter of the other. Their child ends up in World War One, and that's an interesting little tale right there. I'm really looking forward to putting that one together because it's a lot of fun. As far as positivity, I think in terms of if you say I can, I am, as opposed to I can't or if only, you'd be feeding the more uplifting aspects of your mind. So if you're thinking good thoughts, if you put good thoughts in, good thoughts will come out. Right? Plus, plus, win-win. The other thing is not to feel as though you're a victim, because you may feel in that particular way. But if you can accept the what of the disease or the cause of the disease, the why of the reaction you have to the situation, and then embrace the how for the resolve, you will have moved forward with quantum leaps to do so. Let's see.
And the third question was how folks can reach you to get the copy of the book and to learn more about your life and everything. And I have been thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, just like I did the last one as well. I hope you enjoyed it as much as the last one.
Spending time with you has the last two times. I'm ready to come back again. Is uplifting and enlightening and fun. Because it's not all about, what you wrote in this chapter and you wrote in that chapter. No, this is a conversation. I enjoy this. The book can be found on Amazon, and you can find the link on my website, which is www.fjdwriter.com. I can be reached at my email is different now, fjd.writer@gmail.com, or I can be found on LinkedIn. You can punch my name up, and if you Google me, you'll get, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages of information right on down the line. There's a link on my website to my art site as well. So you can see some of the works that I have put on the internet that are all sold because I haven't had the time to get into the studio situation. But because I've been writing, it's another aspect of my artistic expression. So because of the rheumatoid, I've kind of slowed down on the sculpting side because it really wears me out. But the writing has been a very good stimulus for me.
Great. I said that was the last question I liked. Like I often do, I was doing everything. But how important do you think we are doing in terms of allowing people to be creative? Because you just mentioned being a writer and an artist. And I know that the network here, both of the founders sometimes feel that they wish that we gave more love to the arts because it can help in training critical thinking. And we oftentimes complain that there's not enough critical thinking all in that space. But I was just wondering, how much do you feel that we're giving both kids and adults the freedom to be creative?
That's extremely important. I mean, I taught as an adjunct professor the anatomy and physiology, biology, and things like that at the school Judith taught. And one of the courses was critical thinking. And I would put crayon and paper on the desk as part of that and say, hey, yeah, we're going to talk about we're going to read this paragraph and how would you handle that? And we're going to do all that. But before we do that, let's play.
Mhm.
And if they can introduce more play, the students, the adults, if it's an adult class, are all going to benefit from that with leaps and bounds, because play is like good hormones, good endorphins go into the brain,
Right.
uplifting.
Yep, definitely very uplifting. I know that your wife had asked you that promise and everything, and none of us know the day or time. That's that old saying. We all know our birthday because that's the day that we came in. None of us really know our end date. I mean, I'm sure that God and those up above have an idea of when the end date, but none of us know. And there is oftentimes that conversation about living the best you can with that dash in between, which is the period in between whatever the birth year was and the end year. And I guess the question I have for you, Frank, is what is something that you are hoping to accomplish or that you wish to accomplish before whatever that end date is? And like I said, I'm personally going for 200, even though I know nobody's actually done that. But
I like the way you think, Mark. If I've got what's going on here and everything else is running smooth, I mean, my mom's 99, God bless her, and she's still going strong. So genetically, I think I've got a shot. But I think, I think God, creator, whatever your thoughts are on that as an individual, is already planned.
Mhm.
We make choices,
Right.
and that's where it changes.
Mhm.
So you may be on the path,
Mhm.
but you might make a choice that you think happens to be good, but turns out pretty terrible or
Mhm.
slows you down.
Mhm.
And if you can overcome that or you get past that, you'll be well on your way. And I think that's what happened to me.
It's interesting you say that because I've got a dear friend, and that's actually what we were talking about a couple of days ago. Because they were feeling that they had, I think the expression is the juju, but they didn't quite put it that way. But they had kind of like lost their juju because they had allowed some other people to derail their general plans and their general things that they wanted to do because they started getting caught up in those folks' ambitions and those folks' goals, and not
Mhm.
necessarily their own personal goals and aspirations and things of that nature. And I know I've been guilty of that as well, where you sometimes let other people's dreams stop your own dreams or become your dreams, even though they're not necessarily your dreams as much as it is the dreams of others. So I was just wondering, have you run across that and how do you deal with that? Because I'm thinking there might have even been a time in your own life where you were feeling that you had lost that zest, for lack of a better term, and everything. It was just kind of like going through the
Go
motions.
through the motions. Yeah. As much as my practice as a chiropractic physician was successful, my relationship wasn't. And I was going through the motions. Now, things happened, and I ended up with a lower back injury that took me out of my profession, but didn't stop me from caring about people.
Right.
So, from that, the Bowen was very helpful in getting me back on track, because then I was able to bring my knowledge base, those gifts that were given to me, back in play.
Mhm.
And then Judith and I got together. We were before that. We were together. And then that relationship rekindled my desire to be happy,
Yeah.
because we had a relationship that was not based on any expectations. It was, I want to be, and I want to be with you.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I just wrote a short article for that title,
Well.
and posted it on LinkedIn,
Mm.
because I was thinking about my relationship and how I was with Judith and how Judith was with me, and how we were willing to just be with one another and share and experience and laugh and cry and bump heads and all of those things without expectation. Because when you're growing up, you have expectations because your parents put them on you. I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And you sit there or you stand there and you go, but Mom, Dad, I don't want to do that. But eventually, for some reason or other, we end up fulfilling their expectations rather than our own.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that definitely makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Too many times we do that. We try to live somebody else's dreams and not our own dreams, whether it's a relationship or whether it's like you just said, a family member or parent or something along those lines. Is there, whether it's a book that you have in mind that you'd like to write, a person that you'd like to meet, or a place that you'd like to go that you haven't gone yet? Is there I remember the movie Bucket List, and I can't remember the actors. I think Morgan Freeman was one of them. I don't remember the other one. But
Jack Nicholson.
On your bucket list as well, something that you are hoping to accomplish before that end expiration time for yourself.
Well, I want to keep writing. Whatever comes out, comes out. My art, I'll get back to doing that little bits at a time. I want to build a little house, not a tiny home, but a tiny home that's not movable, like 350, 400 square feet, and then have my studio so I can write in and I can do my art in. As far as bucket list, I'd like to see the Amazon rainforest before it's gone. I'd like to see the Amazon rainforest, and I would like to sail in a race from Los Angeles, California to Hawaii. It's probably going on right now, or at least getting close to that time. And I also want to sail solo across the Atlantic.
Wow. That would be amazing.
Go to the Mediterranean. Well, I was almost there. I got sailed solo from Bermuda back to the States. That was 846 miles of pure enjoyment. I mean, solitude. I like solitude. For some reason, I have this affinity to be quiet. I like quiet.
Was there anything that surprised you about Bermuda? Because I know that speaking of folks that have passed, a friend of my dad's was actually involved in Bermuda politics. Stu Hayward was his name and everything, and he only passed away. I believe it was last year. I don't think it was this year. I believe it was last year that he passed away. But he was also very much of a environmentalist and did a lot of sustainability work there in Bermuda and all in that kind of space. And of course, everybody knows the stereotypical Bermuda triangles where things just disappear. So things that were surprised you about Bermuda, and if there were ways that you stayed away from the triangle.
Oh my God! Bring up the Bermuda Triangle. Holy mackerel! Both trips. Just a side note. Yeah, both trips, going and returning. All of the instruments failed. Compass failed. GPS failed. All the electronics. The single sideband radio failed. I mean, I was like sailing, flying blind. It's like I had no idea where you were going, especially if it was at night, because you didn't have the sun to give you some direction in terms of how you might be heading. And each trip almost 10 hours each way. It was. I can't believe you said that. That's funny, but it was kind of torturous at the moment. It's like, oh God, here I am. Where am I going? I felt like I was in a Rod Serling Twilight Zone episode.
Right. Amazing. Well, like I said, I have thoroughly enjoyed this and everything. If you have any last thoughts that you want to give to the audience, I'll give you the full screen. And then after you say that, I'll go out with a couple of these commercials that I've got over here and everything. But yeah, you're always welcome to come back. We can do these all on a regular basis, but definitely, you're always welcome to come back and share your thoughts whenever you're available. But I know that there are other podcasters that are pulling at you as well. But yeah, I also enjoy the conversational nature of most of these shows that I do. So definitely, anytime you want to come back, just let me know and I'll gladly book you for another episode here on Pod TV as well.
Well, I'll leave you with a quote, and I tried to do that last time, but I finally did remember. But this particular one is by a man by the name of B.J. Palmer, the son of the founder of chiropractic, and he wrote, "You never know how far-reaching something you may think, say, or do will affect the lives of others, even millions." It is the second part of that is anonymous. I never found out who wrote it. It is better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. And as far as husbands out there who are in the grieving process, stuck in survivor's grief, I say, light one candle for yourself. Hold that candle up to help you find your way and find peace and blessings and health to your listeners and you, Mark.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that. I think we'll go out with this thing about dinner and some of the other PSAs, including one about some vegetarian type food and everything. So there's actually a lady that does a show here that has her own spice blend. I might get one or two other ones as well. But as always, it's been fun talking to you, Frank, and I look forward to having another conversation with you in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Mark. A pleasure to be here, and always good to see you as well. You have a good evening.
Do say.
This place that I call. I don't want to explain it to her that you love me.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
The only trick you need to save time and money is to shop at Aldi. Aldi. Shop differently. Limitless length plus volume. Sensational from every angle. New Lash Sensational Sky High Mascara. Only from Maybelline, New York. Everything that touches your baby should be this comforting. Pamper Swaddlers. The #1 choice of hospitals is 2 times softer. All right, Trivago. Find me a hotel somewhere in Thailand where I can wake up with a view of the ocean. Awesome. The future. It's impossible to see. And when it's finally here, it might not be what you'd expect. It might just be better. Introducing Luxury Electric. Introducing Lucid Air. We're for those who love to discover, who don't need to travel to find something new, and who know when you spend less, you can discover even more at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Smooth, velvety chocolate wrapped in precious gold. Ferrero Rocher.